Hi, grade 12. I hope you are good, okay? This is Pipa Fana from Philippine Academic Support. Let us check the theory of evolution, Darwin versus Lamarck. Stay tuned. We have the evolution theories here. So remember that what is evolution, guys? Evolution, it is the process of change in the characteristic of biological species over time. We say it is what? The process of change in the characteristics of biological species over time. So now we have the evolution theories. So now we have the theory of Lamarck, Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, who was born around 1744 and died around 1829. So this guy proposed the law of use and disuse and the law of what? Inheritance acquired characteristics. So under law of use and disuse, he says that now changes in the environment create new needs that causes organism to modify their existing organs to meet the need. You see? Mean that now, good people, he says that the more you use your structure or rather your organ, it will get more developed. You get my point? If you don't use it, it will become small or it will disappear. So that is why he says that repeated use of an organ would cause it to enlarge and become more efficient. Disuse of an organ would cause it to degenerate, which is wrong. In other words, we know, guys, the more I lift heavy weights, yes, now I'm going to lift. Yes, my muscle will get more developed due to be more trained by lifting heavy weights. But it doesn't mean that now my children will also have muscles. No, nature favors. They must inherit the original genes of not me having the muscles. You get my point? So he is trying to say that the more individuals or rather each and every organism uses its structure more frequently, it will get more developed. But rather if you don't use it, it will disappear or that will get small. So he says that now under the law of inheritance or acquired characteristics, he says that now the modification of an organism acquired during its lifespan will be passed on to its offspring, which is wrong. He tries to say that now if I dye my hair with pink, my children will also come having a pink hair, which is wrong because they must inherit what? The original gene, not the artificial one that I made. You get my point? I can't dye my hair with pink and my baby will come out with what? Pink hair. No, while originally my hair was what? Black. Mean that now children must inherit what? The original genes. Due to what? Genetics. You get my point? So mean that now we have the application questions that most of the time they might use it in order for the learners to remember the theory of Lamarck. So mean that now right over here they used what? The explanation of the giraffes. So mean that now they say how to describe Lamarckism example. So here right here you can see that here we have what? The giraffe here. So check the neck, check the size of the neck. So they are not the same. Mean that now originally the giraffes they had what? They had short necks. So mean that now if you can check, this is the tree and this is what? Maybe the bananas there. So mean that now originally the giraffes had what? Short necks. They frequently stretched their necks to reach what? The food. Mean that now the acquired characteristic mean that now, good people, the more they stretch their neck to reach the food on trees, mean that now the necks became longer. Mean that now the acquired characteristic of having long neck was then passed to the next generation. That is how he was trying to explain what his law by proving it to the giraffes by saying that originally all giraffes had what? Short necks. They frequently stretched their necks to do what? To reach for the food on the trees. Mean that now their neck became longer. The acquired characteristic of having long necks now was then passed to the next generation. So now under the exam room, they say that now guiding questions. What was the original characteristic at the start? Lamarck's explanation. He says that now all giraffes had short necks originally. This is what I was busy trying to show you. So giraffes frequently stretch their necks. So what did the organism do? The giraffes stretched their necks. If you can check here, they stretched their necks. Why? they use their necks to reach for leaves for tall trees, or rather for food there. Meaning that now their necks became longer. So what happened to this new characteristic? The long necks acquired in this way could be passed on the next generation. Meaning that now he says that they were inherited, which is wrong. So what was the result of this? Which resulted from what? All the giraffes to have what? Long necks. You get my point? So that is why here, this is the law of use and disuse. Mean that now originally when the giraffes had short necks, they frequently started to do what? To use their necks. You see now. So mean that now their neck became long, and the acquired characteristic of having long neck was then passed to the next generation. That is why modern giraffes have long necks, according to Lamarck. You see? So doesn't mean that now, good people, it will always appear in the giraffe. They might give you the trunk of the elephant. Yes, you see, this one might be short. Let us say this is an elephant like this. This trunk, yes. And then now we have a long trunk here. So mean that now you just substitute the giraffes, the necks there, then you add the trunk. Mean that now he was going to say that originally elephants had what? Short trunks. Elephants frequently stretch their trunks to do what? To reach for leaves of tall trees to feed. Mean that now their trunk became long. The long trunk acquired in this way could be passed on the next generation. Mean that now, good people, the more you know this, each and every question that the examiner brought, you'll be able to smash it. Sometimes they might bring you what? The whales. The whales, yes. Mean that now, Lamarck was going to say that originally, whales had what? Long necks. I mean, legs. Sorry. Originally, whales had what? Legs. Mean that now, they went in the water in order for what? For searching for food. Mean that now, legs were used less. Mean that now, they disappeared. So, the acquired characteristic of having no legs was then passed to the next generation. That is why modern whales do not have legs. So mean that now, guys, I'm trying to give you the knowledge that don't cram, but rather understand what you study. Yes. So now, here you might be given what? The question says that explain one way why Lamarck's theory it is not accepted, or rather it was rejected by most scientists. Remember that now, he says that now acquired characteristics. I mean, why did we reject the theory of Lamarck? The acquired characteristics, they are not inherited. You get my point? They are not inherited. Yes. He says that acquired characteristics do not cause any change to the DNA of an organism's gamete, or rather sperm or the ova. Remember that he says that now there is no inheritance amongst the organism the moment when they develop. Mean that he says that now the nature, the environmental changes, it is the one that causes what? These things to do what? To use their organs. You get my point? How? The moment when the tree it is fully developed with what? The fruits, mean that now some of the giraffes were attracted by those fruits, so mean that now they frequently started to do what? To stretch their necks to reach for that fruits on the tree. He's trying to say that. He says that now, according to me, there is no that thing of that organisms, there is the alleles, there is what? Nature there that favors, or no. Mean that now Lamarck did not understand the work of genetics, did not understand what? The reproduction, because now during the formation of a zygote, we need to inherit what? The genes from one parent, each parent. And genetics, mean that now nature it favors good people. We need to have what? Crossing over in order for us to introduce what? The genetic variation. And random arrangement of chromosomes. So those are the things now that will make us different. Yes. So that is why we say that now Lamarck's theory, it is not accepted. Why? Acquired characteristics, they are not inherited. Yes. So now, here you are given what? Darwin, the most interesting scientist who gave what? The knowledge of what? Evolution. So Darwin, Charles Darwin, he was born around what? 1809 and died around 1882. So mean that now the Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection, he says that now there is a great deal of variation. Remember what is variation, good people? Variation, it is the differences in organism of the same species. You get my point? So if you can check me and you, ne, we are not identical. I might be tall, you might be short. I might be brown skin color, you might be what? Yellowish, so wabo. Meaning that now, me and you, we are not the same, and the chances of the survival of me and you, it is not the same. The lifespan, all right, how nature favors me and you, it is not the same. Or yes, how we react. You get my point? Mean that now variation, it is controlled, or rather it is introduced by the sources of variation. So most of the time, remember that we had what? Meiosis. And meiosis, it forms gametes. Mean that now the gametes, they will be genetically different from each other. How? Remember, we have the process of crossing over. That is whereby now we saw that now we have what? The exchangement of the genetic material. Yes, mean that now it introduces what? The genetic variation together with a random arrangement of chromosomes. Whereby we saw that now when the chromosome, they align at the equator, that is whereby now each and every chromosome now, it will align at the equator randomly, does not influence one another. That is why we say that now there is a great deal of difference amongst the offspring, because variation, we learn about the differences. Mean that now he says that some have favorable characteristic and some do not. Mean that now some have unfavorable characteristic. So he says that now when there is a change in the environmental condition, maybe if there is a competition, remember that when we live on the same species, we compete on the same land, we compete. Mean that now some of organisms, they might have favorable characteristics to survive there. So mean that now, let us say they are exposed to hot temperatures. We might see that now some of the organisms, they might survive what? The temperature that is high. Some of them, they might not. You get my point? Mean that now, for those that they did not survive for that temperature, they will die. Mean that now they have unfavorable characteristics to survive on that high temperature. While those who survived on high temperature, they have what? Favorable characteristic. Meaning that now the ones that they survived, mean that now that they are adapted to high temperature, they will survive. While those ones who are not exposed to high temperature, they will die. Mean that now the ones that they survived, they will be able to reproduce and pass the allele of surviving on high temperature to the next generation. So that is why here we say that there is a great deal of variation amongst the offspring. Some have favorable characteristic and some do not. Mean that now they have unfavorable characteristic. So when there is the change in the environmental condition or the competition, then organism with characteristic which make them suited to survive, which means now organism with that have favorable characteristic will survive, while those having unfavorable characteristic which make them less suited, they will die. You get my point? Mean that now the organism that survive, they will be able to reproduce and pass the allele to the for having favorable characteristic to the offspring. Mean that now the next generation will therefore have what? A higher proportion of individuals with what? Favorable characteristics. You get my point? So this is what the theory of Darwin. Mean that now it is not always that the examiner will always bring this thing the way it is. No. You get my point? You see? So mean that now they might bring it with what? The viruses, the antibiotics, or wanna mean that now each and every application question might come requiring this knowledge. So mean that now note the differences on how to answer this from what? Previous years. I can remember evolution, yes, things that once lived past years ago. So how to describe Darwin? So if you can check now, this is natural selection in action. So we can see that now this is what the giraffes that have what? Short necks and the ones that have long necks. And this ones now, we can see that now the ones that have what? Are short necks, the one that has what? Short neck, it died. It died. Mean that now this one was busy, maybe it was growing. Mean that now they were competing in order to eat here. Here. So mean that now if you can check, this is how they were competing. So mean that now the ones that they had short necks, they were not capable to do what? To reach Mean that now they were not able to stress their necks because they were having unfavorable characteristic to do that. You get my point? While the ones that had what short, long necks were having favorable characteristics. Wabo? Mean that now, today, we are having what? A greater proportion of giraffes having long necks, because now we can see that now the ones that had short necks, they died. Mean that now the reduction of having short necks of the species of the giraffes of having short necks died. The remaining ones were the ones that having favorable characteristic to do what? To eat on what? The trees that were tall, because they were able to have what? Long necks. Mean that now the ones that had long necks, good people, they were able to reproduce and passing the allele for having long necks to the next generation. You get my point? So now, here they say that now, state the gene characteristic that varies. Wabo? Mean that now, the gene that makes these giraffes to be different. Wabo? It is the length. So that is why we say that now, there is a variation in the length of the giraffe's necks. Wabo? Describe the variation. There were giraffes with what? Long necks and short necks. You get my point? So explain the environmental change, the selection pressure for natural selection. Mean that now, this is what? The competition now. This is what they were competing. So leaves or other food was only available at the top of the tree. Wabo? Mean that now, selection took place between the giraffes with long necks and short necks for food. Wabo? So now, we state the unfavorable characteristic and why it is unfavorable. So giraffes with short necks could not get food from the top of the tree. Because of what? Their necks were too short. Wabo? Mean that now they died. While the ones that having long necks, they survived. Wabo? So mean that now the giraffes with long necks could get food from the trees. You get my point? Wabo? So mean that now the giraffes with long necks, they were able to reproduce and pass the allele for long necks to the next generation. That is why the next generation will have higher proportion of giraffe with long necks, not short. Wabo? This one, it makes sense. You get my point? Because nature, it favors. Wabo? Because it occurs within what? One species there. Wabona. So mean that now, nature, it is the one that favors good people. Wabo? So we need what? The inheritance. Mean that now we compete. Wabona. We compete. So for the ones that have, or rather the ones that had short necks, they died because they were having unfavorable characteristic to reach, or rather to reach what? Food. Wabo? Yes, because the trees were tall. While the ones that had long necks, they were able to do what? To eat. Mean that now, the ones that were having short necks, they died due to hunger. You get my point? They died. While the ones that were busy having long necks, they were busy feeding. Mean that now, the time when there was an attraction, the species-specific courtship behavior, the mating. Mean that now, this one and this one, they attracted to each other. Mean that now, the moment when they reproduce, the allele for long neck was then passed to the next generation. Definitely, the resulting offspring will have long necks. Wabona. So that is why you can check. Wabo. So now we can see that now we have the differences between what? Lamarck's theory and the Darwin's theory. Wabo. So this is Lamarck. He says that now variation of offspring brought about individuals in the population that are changing. Wabo. Remember that now they might say tabulate the differences between what? Between Lamarck and Darwin. So Lamarck theory, we say that variation of offspring brought about individuals in the population that are changing. Wabo? Offspring inherited the variation. Yes. Mean that now, Lamarck, he is trying to say that the differences of offspring brought about individuals. Mean that now, the parents that have these things suited, the acquired characteristic of the parents will then be now acquired by the offspring. Yes. So Darwin saying that now offspring inherited the variation. Mean that now, what made this offspring to be like this? Variation. You get my point? From what? The parents' gametes. Yes. So now he says that now individuals want to change. And then Darwin says that now environmental factors working randomly. Wabo? The environmental good people, nature is the one that selects. So this one, he says that individuals want to change, mean that now the more I use my structure, I want to change. Wabona? So naturally, the nature must be the one that must work. So here he says that change because of the adaptation to the environment. So mean that now, since then we are now surrounded within this environment. He says that now the moment when you are adapted to this environment, whatever that you use, the more it develops, mean that now it will be the one that will be the cause of the offspring. So here Darwin says that now natural selection, it is the one that is best suited to the environment, to the what that is best suited to the environment will survive. Mean that now the best suited to the environment will survive. Yes, because natural selection best suited to the environment will survive. Mean that now the ones that have favorable characteristic will be the one that will be able to survive. Yes. So this one says that individuals in the population change, while here we say the whole population changes. Yes, because individuals in the population changes. No, because he's trying to say that those ones who are busy doing these activities, they will be the one that are adapted to change. But when we go to nature, the whole population changes. Remember that now we are now moving from short necks to long, meaning that now we have the reduced short necks, they died, meaning that now the population changes, all of it. We are now experiencing longer necks of the giraffes. So this one says that now changes brought about what? By adaptation to the environment are inherited from parents by offspring. Mean that now whatever that I change within my body, the offspring will also inherit that, which is wrong. I can't dye my hair with pink, then my child will come with a pink hair. So this guy, he says that now characteristics are passed from generation to generation, enables individuals to survive in the environment. So mean that now the sources of variation, they are the ones like crossing over and random arrangement of chromosomes. Mean that now those will be the one that will introduce what? That will introduce variation, thus increasing the survival of the species. You get my point? So mean that now the Lamarck theory, the Darwin theory was accepted because it shows that now the characteristics, they are inherited from what? From parents to offspring. Mean that now we have what? The alleles, the genes, they will be inherited from parents to offspring. Not the acquired. Mean that now nature, it is the one that favors. So the ones that are suited on the environment, they will survive. Mean that now they will be able to pass the allele, yes, or the characteristics of having of best suited to the environment to the next generation. That is why his theory was accepted, because there is a proof to show that the genes they are inherited, and also there is the variation amongst the species that will make them best suited on the environment. While in the Lamarck theory, we can see that now there is no proof to show that now the acquired characteristics are inherited. Mean that now there is no proof to show that now the more I use my structure, the more it will get more developed. You get my point? You see, yes, in other ways, yes, it might be there, but there is no proof to show that now the more I lift heavy weights, my children will come having more muscles like their father, which is wrong. You see, but definitely he is wrong. You see, so that is the challenging, or rather the easiest part of what? Darwin and Lamarck. You see now, until we meet again to the punctuated equilibrium. All the best. Thank you.